Well, Katelyn, I want to thank you for joining me today. We're here to talk about your story and the film I Can, which tells your story. Now, you had turned down movie offers a number of times, I think 3 times before you agreed to I Can. Why did you turn those previous offers down?
Yeah, that's correct. I turned it down, one, because I didn't personally think I had a story to share. I didn't want to be seen as sitting on a pedestal. And I also thought there was more people in our congregation that needed their story to be told. And it wasn't only me who denied it 3 times, it was also my dad. So Tyler Sansom, the director of the movie, he's also my pastor. He does sermons with my dad, and he knows a little bit about my dad's story. And so he was like, "Hey, Eric, can I do a story about your family?" And my dad was like, no. And he was like, "Why not?" And he's like, "Well, all of our sins are going to be displayed on the big screen, and everybody's going to see what happened in my past." And Tyler was like, "Well, if you can help one person find and follow Jesus, would you do it?" And my dad said, "Absolutely. But you're going to have to ask Katelyn." So that's when Tyler came and asked me. And that's why I denied him 3 times. And he asked me the same question. He said, "Well, if you can inspire one person and if you can help one person find and follow Jesus, would you do it?" And I said, "Absolutely."
And so here we are. You did it. You finally said yes, and the film was made. Now, I want to talk about a couple of elements here because it is very difficult also to tell your story, to tell anybody's story, right? When it's personal, when there are events that have happened that we're not proud of, I think most people would be hesitant to open up those chapters. But also in your case, you said, you felt like other people had stories. You didn't have a story to tell. Meanwhile, you have an incredible story to tell. But I think those are interesting elements. Can you talk a little bit about, there's 2 things here. The first is that you were born with a birth defect and overcame and have done incredible things. And we're going to talk about all of that. But your father, his hesitancy, can you talk a little bit about what drove him to say, hey, initially, I don't know that I want my story out there?
Yeah, so I was conceived out of wedlock due to an affair. Both my parents were married previously, and then when they got together, they had me. And so they both thought that their sin caused me to be born with one arm. They thinking that cheating on their spouses and getting together caused me to be born with one arm. And my grandma, my dad's mom, whenever I was born, told my dad, "You know what? God doesn't make mistakes. He has a plan in all of this. He has a purpose for this, and he has a reason for this." And that's a little bit why my dad didn't want to share a story. It's just because that he thought he was falling short because he sinned, and he felt guilty me being born with one arm just because of his past.
He felt it was a punishment
A
from God,
punishment.
which, a lot of people struggle with this when it comes to theology and seeing things that happen as being a direct, punishment for something that we've done. And here you are, and I think this is the incredible part about your story, inspiring people all over the country, all over the world, with this amazing story that God has used. And before we get into your story, being born with one arm, and the struggles that have come with that and the victories that have come with that, when did faith come into your family's experience? When did you guys become Christians?
So I initially grew up in a Christian household. My father went to church every Sunday with his parents. They were really religious. My mom was a believer, but she didn't go to church all the time. She went during Christmas. So it's like special occasions like Easter. But when she was 16, she went to a church camp and she felt the Holy Spirit lead her and she got baptized. So I grew up in the church, and especially living with my dad's parents really helped out a lot. So I grew up in the church, but initially in the 5th grade is whenever I decided that I wanted to be baptized.
That's amazing. And so you grow up in faith and you're born with one arm. Talk about those struggles. What was it like growing up, with that birth defect? How did people treat you? You have, from what I understand, a very positive outlook, and we're going to get into that. And you have overcome so much, but talk about the experience.
I never really realized that I had one arm, and my mom tells this story when I was about 2 years old, and I found a picture of myself, and I showed her. I was like, "Mom, look, my arm broke. My arm's broke." And she goes, "Your arm's not broke. That's how God made you." And so that was like one of the first realizations that I knew like I had one arm. But growing up, I faced a lot of adversity. I faced a lot of challenges that I had to overcome and adapt to. And one of the first things that I can think of was in kindergarten. So my dad always told me that I can do all things. Like, I can do all things if I set my mind to it. It might look a little different than somebody else, but if I work hard, I can accomplish it. And obviously through Christ, I can do all things. But the first, I call them I can't moments. I was in kindergarten and my teacher sent home a note to my parents saying, you either need to buy Katelyn Velcro shoes or teach her how to tie her shoes, because I'm tired of tying her shoes every day. I have a lot of kids that I have to deal with. And so that was the first the first thing that I had to overcome, was tying my shoes in kindergarten, knowing that I was different. And my dad sat me home on the couch after school, and he said, well, do you want to learn how to tie your shoes, or you want Velcro shoes? And I said, I'm no different than anybody else. I want to learn how to tie my shoes. So I sat down and worked on it. My dad tried to show me how he tied his shoes. But the next day I walked up to my teacher and I said, look, I can tie my shoes. So it was just things, I call them I can't moments, that I had to face growing up. So that was one instance. And then it was also not just kids. Kids are curious, but their parents. Parents pulling their child away from me, playing with them because I just look different. My mom also tells a story where I was at a public pool and I was playing with a little girl, and I stood up, and she didn't know I had one arm, but when I stood up, the little girl got scared. And instead of her mom saying, it's okay, people are different, she's okay, she pulled her child away from me and walked to the opposite end of the pool. So it was just things like that I had to learn how to overcome and just brush off my shoulder.
That's so painful. You know, it's interesting, and I can't speak from your experience, and feel free to push back on this, but it almost seems like, you know, you figure it out. You figure out how to deal with what you're given in life and how God makes you. And the most painful part of the experience is how people are behaving, not necessarily
Right.
what you've gone through. It's dealing with other people and the presuppositions, the assumptions they make that you can't do certain things, the way they treat you. I mean, would that be accurate?
It's accurate. And that's when I said I turned that can't into continue adapting, never turning back. So you continue to adapt to any adversity that you're thrown in life, and you overcome that to become successful. You don't go back to your old ways. You don't give up. You keep pushing on to be successful, to show people that you can. And that's just what I did my whole life, especially through the sport of softball.
Yeah, well,
Getting to
let's
that.
talk about that, because I mean, an All-American athlete, you receive a scholarship to play college softball, one arm. I mean, most people can't do it with two arms, get a scholarship to play any sport. You know, some people do, but it's tough to do. Talk about that. I mean, what did it take to get there and to reach that level of success, especially because, again, there were certain things you had to work harder at or figure out how to do it differently?
Yeah, so first off, I started playing softball at 3 years old, and my dad was my t-ball coach. So just growing up with him in the backyard playing softball, he tells me a story when I was a couple months old, when he realized that I had some hand-eye coordination. He got me out of the bath when I was a baby, laid me on the ground, and he had a little squishy ball, and he would hold it above my head, and he was like, let's just see what happens. So he dropped it, and to his surprise, I caught it. And he's like, all right. That sparked his interest because he grew up with two brothers and they all played sports, and he was an athlete. So he's like, yeah, this is awesome. So he did it again, and I caught it. So the next day he went out to Walmart and bought one of those Velcro gloves that I could practice working on my hand-eye coordination. So that's how I started. And then growing up with T-ball, I had to learn how to catch with the same hand and throw with the same hand. So what I would do first, I would catch the ball, I would drop my glove, step on it, pick up and throw it. And my dad was like, that is way too slow if you ever want to play competitively. So what I have now is called a glove transfer, where I catch it, I tuck it under my short arm, grab the ball out and throw. But that took just countless hours in the backyard with my dad, countless times just after practice. And it was about when I was 8 years old, I started playing more competitively. I started on a travel team. But that's when there was a lot of words from parents, words from other players, words from coaches. I vividly remember I was playing a team, and the coach called timeout, and I was up to bat, and he moved all of his players in. He's like, move in, move in, move in. She can't hit. And just coaches like that,
Wow.
before I even started playing, doesn't even know who I am, just disrespects me just because of my arm. So telling their players to move in, move in. The third baseman was so close to me when I was in the batter's box that I could give her a high five. That's how close she was playing to me. And it was also the parents just complaining. And I was on a travel team when I was at this age, and I was doing pretty well. I was playing outfield, and I was starting most every single game. And to me, I thought I was doing well until I got a phone call from my coach. And she said, hey, I need to tell you something, tell your family something, so can you come meet me at my house? So we went to her house, and she said, I'm going to have to ask you to leave my team.
What?
Yeah. So I was like, what? Because I was like, I'm playing, I'm starting, like, what's wrong? And she said, well, I don't like drama on my team. And she said, you're causing a lot of drama. She said, parents are complaining that a girl with one arm is playing over their daughter with two, and they just don't understand. And I can't deal with this drama on my team, so I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
So because you were outperforming people, it was your fault, and because you were there, it was your fault. Their reaction was your fault in her view.
Yes, they didn't know how to deal with it. She didn't want to deal with it. So she wanted me to leave initially. And
Katelyn, how did you stay? And I want you to finish that story, but as I'm hearing all this, how did you stay positive as you have these people, and not just kids who are just mean sometimes, but adults who are being cruel? How did you keep your positivity and your drive and all of that?
So my dad told me that I should use those words as fuel to get better. And so I listened to him, and those words hurt. They hurt a lot, and it did make me sad, and it did make me feel bad. But I knew that I had a greater purpose. I knew I had a talent in softball, and I knew that God gave me this talent, and I wanted to use those words as fuel to prove to them that I deserve to be out there and I deserve to play. And I just had to learn to let those words just go right through me and not try to affect me as a person and how I played.
That's great advice for people who are watching or listening who are dealing with similar situations. But I do want you to finish the story about the team. So I just had to ask you that because it's overwhelming as you are describing these things, how difficult and terrible it is that people treated you this way. So she tells you to leave the team. Did you leave the team?
We did. And I was raised to turn the other cheek like Jesus did, and just to leave. And so we did, and it hurt a lot. But like I said, I used those words as fuel to get better. So after that, I worked countless hours with my dad, countless hours just trying to improve my skills to get better. And eventually went into high school, and that's when my goals was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. My goal was to play college softball. So I go to all these college camps, and I'm hearing the same thing from college coaches. Man, you have great skills. I would love to have you on my team, but, and there was always a but I don't know how to coach a girl with one arm, or I don't know how my players will react to having a teammate with one arm. So coaches would never give me a chance. And it didn't happen just when I was younger. It also happened when I was older, trying to get a college scholarship. And so I wrote goals down on a board in high school and what I wanted to accomplish. And that was one, to hit my first home run, to become an all-conference player, to become an all-state player, and to sign a college scholarship to play softball. And going into my senior year, I did accomplish that. I hit my first home run. I was MVP of my conference, and I was the first female or male from my high school to become an all-state player in the state of Indiana. And lastly, I wanted to sign a college scholarship. And that's how I met my coach, Coach Corey Gardner. And going to those camps, the same camps as those college coaches told me that, you know, they'd love to have me, but they never gave me a chance, is where I met Coach Gardner. And he was actually there to recruit a pitcher and catcher. So he wasn't even looking for me, a little outfielder. And so he was at one field, and he had an assistant coach that was at my field. And he was watching the pitcher and catcher, and she was watching our little game that was going on. And she called him and was like, hey, you need to come over here. You need to see this player. And she didn't even mention that I had one arm. And so he was like, no, we're here just to get this pitcher and catcher duo. And she said, no, like, you need to come over here right now. So he came over and he saw me play. And after the game, he said, man, you know what? I don't care if you have one arm, no arms. If you can play ball, you can play ball. And just to have someone have that much belief in me as a player and as a person, and to look past my arm and just see me for who I was, meant so much to me. And he offered me a full ride scholarship. So my senior year, I signed a full ride scholarship to play for Cincinnati Christian University.
I mean, that is absolutely incredible. And people can watch this story. They can see your story being told in I Can. Now, again, you rejected a movie offer 3 times. The 4th time you said yes. The movie is out. What are you hoping people take away from the film?
One, it's the main message in the story that God doesn't make mistakes. And it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, where you come from. God has a purpose for your life, and He made you in His perfect image. And you just need to trust in Him that He has that plan for you. So that's one. And two, I want to inspire people. If I can do it, that you can do it too. So just hopefully it's a big inspiration. And if someone's struggling with the same things that I struggled with, or if what my parents went through, that maybe it can help them as well.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And, you initially thought you didn't have a story. Now that you've seen the reaction to the film and how people are, bringing you on like this to talk about it, do you see the story now? Do you understand why people wanted to tell this story?
Yes, and that also brings me to when I said I didn't know I had a story. Well, when I came across a story in the book of John chapter 9, where Jesus and his disciples came across a man born blind. And his disciples asked Jesus, well, was this man born blind because of his sin, or was he born blind because of his parents' sins? And Jesus says, neither. He was born this way so that the work of God could be displayed through his life. And that hit home to me because I was like, I never knew why I was born with one arm. And I now know, and I now believe that I was born this way so that God could shine through me, so that I could be, so I could show others who He is through how I played softball, how I act, how I talk. So that's what I believe, that I was born with one arm.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And if people want to watch I Can, where can they go to either stream it or get copies of it?
Yeah, so right now we're on Amazon, we're on Tubi, we're on Up Faith and Family. What else? You can also go to we have an I Can page, a Facebook page, and we also have a website, ican.info. You can find a lot of information on that as well.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time. What an incredible story and overcoming. Life can get people down. We're looking right now at skyrocketing rates of suicide and depression. And, when you're going through different things in life, it's easy when God is not at the center. And even when He is, to get sidetracked, to get pushed into an area where you give up hope. And your story is truly evidence of somebody who not only didn't give up hope, but you persisted throughout, even when people treated you in unimaginable ways. So I really appreciate you sharing this story with us today.
Thank you. And I'm glad I was on the show, and I'm happy that hopefully I can inspire one person.